All right, guys, welcome to the last session of REW Academy for 2022. This is a really exciting session for us. We are going to be talking with AJ, or AJ is going to be talking about making sure that as you scale your business, your revenue, but not your workload, you're still able to maintain a profitable business. And so the title was 30% profit margin, scale revenue, not workload. So AJ, we're very excited to have you for this last session and can't wait to hear what you got to share. So we're going to hand it over to you and let's do this.
Rock and roll. Okay, I'm just going to share now. Okay, awesome. All right, so there's a big new logo here called net because that is going to be the most important word going forward. We are going to talk about the journey of scaling a business whilst maintaining a net. And it's going to be something that the Vantage West Academy is going to be all about going forward. So in this new market, there's so much importance on having cash and being able to fund your growth because there's a huge amount of opportunity that we are going to be faced with in terms of being able to grow our market share, but it's going to require cash to do it. And you're going to have a hard time accumulating cash without profitability. So I'm going to talk about how we've done it. Much of what I'm going to share with you was learned by doing it wrong, just like everything I've learned in my life. And I don't want to purport to you that I have everything figured out and that I do all of these things perfectly. But sometimes in doing ththings wrong, it illuminates how you should have done it and how you should do it moving forward. So I'm with you guys. Profitability is an elusive beast, but I think we've got this thing licked now, and I'm excited to share with you how to do it. So for everybody that doesn't know who I am, I'm AJ Hazzi. I'm the founder of the Vantage West group of companies. I've updated my photo here with glasses, even though I don't wear glasses. Those are blue light protectors, but I think it makes me look smart. And when we're talking about financial analysis, why wouldn't you want to look smart, right? So I'm the founder of Vantage West Realty as well as the Vantage West Academy. And if you want to get in touch, I'd love to connect with you on Instagram. You can follow me at VW Academy there. My journey along the way, what I'm hoping to do, just so you guys know, I have a very audacious goal of building a unicorn company of $1 billion value. And I actually believe I'm halfway down the track on that timeline. I've been in the business for 20 years now, and we're at roughly $10 million in revenue, which is, I understand, nowhere near 1 billion. However, how it works is I 10x my business once from 100,000 to $1 million. And all of that was about getting clear on what my value propositions were and really just, bootstrapping my way to $1 million, like many people on this call are in the process of doing. Once I got there, I was able to learn the systems. I was able to learn how to add scale. And over the next 10 years, I was able to 10x again. And so now I'm in the next stage of my growth, and I'm looking to go from 10 to 100. And I fully expect that to take about 10 years, just like the last two 10Xs. And then once you get to 100 million, you're one more 10X away from $1 billion. So even though 10 is nowhere near halfway to $1 billion, from a timeline perspective, I believe that it is. And along the bottom here, I've shown there's some boom and bust cycles. When you're looking at business over a 40-year time horizon, you're going to incur or go through 2 or 3, even 4 market cycles during that period of time. And so I fully expect, that this bust cycle we're in now is going to last a few more years. And then guess what? We know what comes next. We go through a recovery back into a boom. And somewhere along my journey, once I'm at my next pinnacle, I'm going to go through another bust cycle. I'm going to do this 2 more times with you guys. So I take a very long time horizon when it comes to business. And like I said, even though I've been doing this 20 years, I feel like I'm only halfway down the track. In order to scale, though, you need a blueprint, okay? And so I spent a lot of time coming up with this sort of lead conversion blueprint and how to get, put $100 in to get $1,000 out. We figured that out. Once you get that going, the next thing to figure out is this flywheel, right? This is going to allow you to really, truly get momentum and grow your business. And I've done that in another call where I've really broke down how this flywheel works. And then the last piece is you got to get the money right. You got to have all of your ratios correct so that you can add scale. So you got to have the right amount of applications to each of these different pieces of the pie in order to be in the right gear so that you can go down the highway at maximum fuel efficiency as well as maximum power. The 3 keys of profitability. Hang on, I'm just going to check the chat here because I see a couple of things coming through. Well, we're just doing a little tech support, no worries. The 3 keys to profit margin in my belief, are numero uno. You got to come up with the perfect P&L. So that's going back to what I just showed you on the previous screen. Once you kind of have the pie determined, where you know what your profit margin you're going after is, and you know how you're going to get there based on certain percentages that are allocated towards client acquisition, certain percentages that are allocated towards fulfillment, and certain percentages that are allocated towards operations, then you have what you need in order to be able to scale. Because just like we just found out with, say, Compass Real Estate and how it's going under, or how we just found out with Open Door and OfferPad and all these companies whose business model was not sustainable. They were spending $100 to make the TV and then selling the TVs for 95 bucks, losing $5 a TV. Then they got a whole bunch of venture capital and they started making more TVs, each of which they were losing $5 on per unit. That's what they were doing. 10% splits at a brokerage level when you have bricks and mortar and all these staff and all these expenses doesn't make sense. So adding more agents, if you're going to lose $5,000 a year per agent, it doesn't matter how many agents you add, you're still going to be unprofitable. And eventually when the tide goes out, we'll see who's not wearing clothes. So the perfect P&L, you have to have a business model that sustains. You have to have something that's going to work as you add gas to the fire. The other key is profit first accounting. I'm going to do a little deeper dive into that, but it is very hard to ever find profit in your business if you're not using a profit first accounting methodology. We as entrepreneurs tend to defer profit or defer taking money because we're waiting for this elusive day where the business generates this net and the net is just sitting there unused at the end of the day in that general account. That is very rarely going to happen because, as I'll explain later, a small business or even a mid-sized business is a cash eating monster and will always consume whatever cash is available to it. So I'm going to share with you that profit first accounting is like a paramount piece of the puzzle as you add and as you scale. And thirdly is a metric that I want to share with you called the productivity per person or revenue per person, however you want to look at it. But it is a metric that you want to be very mindful of and make sure that that number is improving as time goes on. And we'll go into that a little bit more as we go further into the presentation. Feel free to ask any questions along the way. I'll do my best to get them in the chat. And if I'm ignoring a question, Morgan, feel free to interrupt at any time. So when it comes to business finances, you kind of have this wheel, okay? And there's 5 stages to it. And it starts at stage 1, which is essentially the simplest of the stages. It's just bookkeeping, right? You've got to have somebody measuring. This is looking in the rearview mirror at your business. Okay, adding it up. What did we spend our money on? You know, putting it into the proper departments, putting into, coding it properly and having a good, proper set of books. Whether you're a solopreneur or you're managing a large team or you're managing a brokerage, you're not going to be able to do this well unless you're measuring. You've got to have really good bookkeeping. And I'm not talking about, all your shoe boxes compiled at the end of the year and handed to a bookkeeper. I'm talking about measurement ongoing on a monthly basis. Okay. So once you've got the bookkeeping, then you can start the analysis portion. So going into stage 2, where we're looking to create that perfect P&L. So we're going to analyze and see where we are in relation to these perfect golden ratios that I've shared. So you're going to analyze and say, okay, well, how much am I spending on clients? How much am I spending on marketing? How much am I spending on fulfillment? All these different numbers. And how does that compare to the golden ratios that I've been taught? That takes us to step 3. You're in the optimization. So once you've measured and you've analyzed, now you're going to take steps towards the optimization, getting closer towards the golden ratio. You're not going to get there overnight, but every time you measure and analyze, you want to take certain steps that you can take toward getting a little bit closer to the ideal ratios. Once you've made those optimizations, typically that leads you into a growth phase. Okay. And a growth phase is all about scaling. And so in this, you're likely going to be entering the phase where you're trying to fund the next milestone or the next sort of plateau that you want to get to. You're funding the team or the business that you want. It doesn't need to be a team. So even though I think in terms of teams, please understand if you're a solopreneur, this still makes sense for you because you're going to be scaling your marketing. You're going to be scaling your administrative support as you go. So there's that phase. As you go into that growth phase, you're reinvesting into your business here and hopefully getting your business up to that next level of profitability. And then the last one and the most exciting part of it all is if we can generate these net profits and these distributions, you have one more step. You're not just putting the money into a bank account to hoard it because it, as you know, is devaluing by the minute with inflation. So in order to have an inflation hedge and to build wealth, and that's what we should all be trying to do. We're in the best business in the world for building wealth. You want to then have a plan to take those distributions and then invest them wisely in cash flowing assets so that you're maximizing the money that you're making and you're building wealth. And over and over and over, this cycle goes. Any questions on this little wheel of fortune? All right. So the perfect P&L.
We're going to be going, never mind, you just pulled up the golden ratio. Never mind. I was about to ask, are you going to go through the golden ratios?
Yeah, you bet. So this is just for simple math, $1 million business, okay? Now, I'm going to push you to pay a split to your business. Even if you're a solopreneur, see yourself, have a separate business account that 50% of your gross commissions goes back into, and then you're going to pay yourself on a 50-50 split, okay? Because you're going to use your own revenue to fund your growth. And there still will be a net dollar at the end of the day. But again, you have to get into these golden ratios. And if you add associates down the line, there's going to be 50% company dollar coming back into the kitty. So you're not asking anybody to do something you haven't been doing all along. So this is a very foundational piece. Pay a split to your business. I recommend 50%. The next ratio is make sure at least you're investing 10% into lead generation or client acquisition. Okay. So for me, that's always been the number I've followed. There's been periods of time where I've bumped that up to 15% because I've wanted to go heavy into the growth. But for the most part, 10% is kind of the sweet spot if you're trying to maintain profitability. So if you can acquire a customer for, roughly 10% of what their gross commission income is going to be, then that's good. If your average check's 10 grand, you should be looking to acquire customers for $1,000 a pop, right? So your lead generation should be 10% of gross. Support salary. Now, this is a space where a lot of people skimp out. They're going to try to do everything themselves. And ultimately, this is where we go back to, we're trying to scale revenue. We're not trying to scale workload. So you need to have 15% allocation to support. This is going to allow you to fulfill. It's going to allow you to have a very standardized, consistent level of service. And you're going to be in a position where as time goes on, you've always got an allocation to add more team members. Okay. And you'll know when you've increased your revenue by enough, you'll know when it's time to add that next layer of support. And then operations, you want to try to keep your operational costs below 5%. So I wouldn't go rent the fancy office until your revenue is there to support it. You got to keep your operations budget below 5%. And that has to include your splits too. And then ultimately that will leave you a 20% margin. You want to protect a 20% margin at all costs. I actually think you can do it at 30%. There's ways to do it, but you have to go to a lower split model. And many people have a hard time getting their heads around that on face value. It takes a larger conversation. A lot of my coaching clients are going to be in that space where we reduce the cost of sale a number of ways. Different splits, i.e. a different value proposition where you're leveraging your agents further, as well as an internship program where you're bringing in licensed help that at a very low cost of sale, which will give you a much lower ultimate cost of sale, which can increase your profit margins to 30%.
AJ, we have a question from James. I think it's from the previous slide. What is a good goal for net profit for each new agent that you add to your team?
The goal on a per agent basis for net. So we have a goal of getting 500 gross on an average agent. So we, when we did 6 million, for example, we did that with 12 agents, right? And so your 100K net per agent was the goal. All right. Mindset's really key here, okay? Especially when we're talking about splits and we're talking about profit. A lot of people think profit's a dirty word. We have to kind of get out of that limiting belief, okay? It's also going to take a lot of discipline to do this. You have to do this monthly. And I'm going to share with you kind of my tips for what you should do on a monthly and quarterly basis. But it takes an immense amount of discipline. And this is where, trial and error for me. I'm not a naturally very disciplined person. I'm easy come, easy go when it comes to money. And so I struggled with this. I wasn't disciplined financially and I burned through millions of dollars that I didn't need to. So don't make that mistake. It also requires extreme ownership. Okay. There's no external factors here with the market. There's nothing to do with the other business models in your market are not dictating your outcome. Take ownership of this. You absolutely can create a profitable, scalable model. It's just about creating enough value within your business to be able to do that. And once you have done it and you've created a model, like we don't compete on splits. And I'm unapologetic about that. I'm also transparent about where the money goes. I happily show all my agents exactly what we reinvest back into the business, what we reinvest back into leverage, what we reinvest back into marketing. And I share with them the profit margin that I get is based on economy of scale. It's based on the fact that my marketing budget is way big. It's 15, 20 times bigger than what yours would be if you're doing it alone. So of course I get better deals on marketing. Of course I get better deals on, I can do better on the amount of leverage I could create because I have multiple administrators that can switch hit and work on multiple agents' business, right? So I get economies of scale, which is why I get a margin, and I'm unapologetic about that. Having profit and having the right golden ratios, and I alluded to this earlier, is all about being in the right gear, okay? We want to go fast. If we're in the wrong gear, meaning we've got the wrong model, we could be going 100 miles an hour in second gear, and what's going to happen? The engine's going to blow. Consequently, we could be in the wrong gear as well, playing it too conservatively. We could be in way too high of a gear, and it's just we don't have the horsepower. We don't have the power underneath us to get up to speed. Okay, so you need to find that right balance, and that sort of 20 to 30% profitability is where you need to be. And the only way you get there is by applying those golden ratios. You need to have that model right. It's like a do not pass go. You need to accomplish that first before you add any gas to this fire. Okay. Now, we all wish that growth was going to be a perfect straight line. That's not how it works, okay? And so if we start at the beginning, kind of in this sort of bottom corner here, I'm gonna try and annotate here if I can. Do I have annotation abilities? Yes, I do. So everybody starts here, okay? In the beginning, there isn't a lot of profitability, and you're gonna have to invest in the company you're trying to build. So let's just say that first revenue milestone was 50,000. You can see this line initially, there's very little profit. As coaching clients that started sort of their business right from nothing, at the end of the year, the revenue was great, but the profit margins were almost nil. It's like, yeah, that's because you're in this stage here. You're investing in your growth, and that's where that is going to be, there is not going to be a lot of cash excess, but eventually it pops. You'll get to that stage where it's sustainable. You start getting the revenue that you were investing in getting, and it pops, and all of a sudden you go through a period of sustained profitability. Okay. But then guess what? You're going to set your sights on this next revenue target. You're going to try and get out to this $100,000 months. Okay. And guess what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to reinvest back into the team that you want. And you're going to go through another period where you're less profitable. Now, the good news is you've got this buffer, right? If you've got a decent amount of profit, you've got the buffer here where you're not going to chew through your own resources. You're going to chew through some of the capital reserves that you've created, right? And that's why there's an ebb and flow you go through accumulation periods, and then you go into reinvestment periods. And it naturally kind of works with the seasons. And I like to do this on a quarterly basis. And so this line of growth is not as linear as we'd like. It kind of goes in these little humps until eventually you've built the business that you want. And if you want to just hit a cruising altitude and stay at that level of profitability, you can, but you're constantly looking to reinvest in that next milestone. Okay, I've got to clear my drawings and I got to get off of annotate. How do I do that? Stop. Okay. So that little phase that you're in as you're kind of going up to that next space, that's your growth phase. Okay, there's you got to know going into this that you're going to go through a period where there's less profit. That's the point. It's an investment that pays off at the end. You can see you get that little S curve right at the end. That's the payoff for it. But you got to go through that 8 months or that 9 months where you sacrificed a bit of your profitability, but you're building it based on the team that you want. You know that when the revenue gets there, the team you're trying to build or the business you're trying to build, the profitability will be there. But you took the expenses of that business model on in advance. Okay, not to the point where you were negative cash flow, but you had to set aside the cash flow or set aside the profits for a period of time to build that next stage. So I built this little chart because I really do think there are seasons to it, and I think it ebbs and flows with the natural quarters of the year. So I think the first quarter of the year is a climbing phase. Okay, so if you're looking at building to that next level, this would be where I would reinvest. I would sacrifice my profitability in Q1, and I would be investing for the team that I'm trying to build for the beginning of Q2. The intention here, and it naturally goes with the seasons, Q2 is when the things really start to ramp up. Okay, you're not going to reinvest now, or you're not going to jack up your expenses yet. You're going to go through a period of accumulation. So we're going to climb into Q1, and then we're going to camp from an expense perspective. We're going to camp at those expenses all the way through Q2. And then you'll have this accumulation phase where the profits in your profit account will grow, and that growth and that accumulation is what's going to fund the next climb. The next climb, you start reinvesting in Q3. It's still a very, very good market. And then that allows you to camp through. So freeze those expenses. Now you've got a new cruising altitude because you've done that investment. You're going to have more leads coming through, more opportunity, and then you hold that through Q4, and then you start the next year in another climb cycle. So this actually allows you to level up twice per year. And if you're leveling up roughly about 35 to 40% each time, the compounding nature of that allows you to actually double your business every year. It's not a perfect thing. You're not going to double your business every single year, but that plan, if you do this in this seasonality approach, you would have a very strong plan towards doubling your business every year. Now, something that dovetails really well into that we've been running as an operating system for a while is the 12-week year. If you're not following a 12-week year periodization, you're definitely leaving money on the table. The reason why is most people set these annual goals. You're probably all doing your annual goal setting now. What you really want is a 12-month goal or 12-week goal, excuse me, because it's based on the fact that the human nature aspect of setting goals is we usually wait till the last minute to act on them anyway. Or you might get a little momentum in the beginning, then it goes in a drawer, and then you really only revisit it by Q3, Q4. And so you kind of waste a bunch of time. By compressing the timeline and compressing the period that you have to work on your goals, you're going to get a lot more done in a less amount of time. And then you actually essentially get 4 years per calendar year. And you also have the 13th week as a buffer in between that you can do sort of that analysis, that planning. You kind of have that week. You can do some celebrating if you hit your goals. And also you have that recalibration of that 13th week of, okay, where are we going from here? What's that next level up? Am I in a camp phase or am I in a climb phase? How's my cash flow? Do I have the ability to now level up to that next level? So 12-week year is really good. Just work it with the calendar year, with the quarters. And this is a wonderful, wonderful book that you guys should read if you haven't already. They said cash is your fuel to grow, okay? And you need to fill your tank just before you head out on a journey. You got to make sure you have a full tank of gas, just like when you're heading out of town, you got to have a full tank of gas before you go to that next level. So it's really important that you go through these accumulation phases and that you always have a certain amount of profitability in your business so that you've always got a full gas tank to fund that next level of growth. The problem that we have, as I mentioned before, is that a business, particularly a real estate one, with all these shiny objects that come at us. I mean, so many sexy new whiz bang things that we can spend our money on every day. So many people hitting us up in LinkedIn outreach, asking if we want to take on their marketing thing or have their done for you service. There's a million ways to spend $2,000 a month in this business. And for that reason, it becomes a cash eating monster. Okay. So the antidote to that is the profit first accounting. Okay. And their tagline is transform your business from a cash eating monster into a money making machine. This was a game changer for us, right? You flip how most people approach business finance and you take your profit first. So the key to that is you have to have multiple bank accounts. So right off the bat, you're going to have 3. Number 1 is your operations account. This is where all of your fixed and variable expenses are going to come out of this operations account. The second account is a tax account. This is the government's money. Obviously, we have to have a separate account for that so that we don't dilute ourselves into thinking we have more money than we do. And the third one, and the most important one, is your profit account. This is your gas tank. So you have to have a separate account for that. In fact, what you'll read in the book, I'm oversimplifying it here. There are other accounts as well, but these are the 3 main ones. They actually suggest that you have at your regular bank where you have access to online banking, et cetera, you have these accounts, but then you actually clone and have separate accounts for both tax and profit at a bank, separate bank, one that's actually not that convenient, one that doesn't have a fancy app, or at least you haven't downloaded it, one that you're not going onto their web banking. And in fact, it's almost a manual, very, analog process to put the money into that account, but then it's out of your way. Like you put financial controls on that you don't have the ability to write checks out of there or anything. Like it's got to be like untouchable money, and you move your profit over there and you move your tax money over there so that you don't fall to temptation and dip into those accounts. So the framework is simple. On the profit account, you're going to use that money to grow your business. Okay, that's how you add scale when you're going into those growth periods. You're also going to distribute. That's the love. That's the fun and the exciting part. You're going to distribute to yourself quarterly based on the money that accumulates in there, and you're going to build your cash reserves. This is how you build, some real armor, and you fortify your business. The operations account is exactly what it sounds like. You want to have minimum of 1 month's cash in terms of your expenses. So if you're spending 20 grand a month on your business right now, you want to make sure there's at least 20 grand as like that's your zero. You never want to go below a month's worth of cash. The real goal is to get, up to 3 months cash reserves. Then of course you have your tax account. I think setting aside 10% of the gross is a good thing to do. It's usually more than you need once your accountant works his magic and does all your deductions for you. But if you set aside 10% out of the gates, once you pay your quarterly tax installments, there's usually a little bit of money left over, and you can transfer that to profit. But move 10% of gross out of your line of sight right out of the gates, and you're always going to have enough money to stay current with the taxes. I'm embarrassed to say, 17 years of my career paying last year's tax bill with this year's revenue, having to distribute more to myself every year. It was a vicious cycle because in order to pay, I was increasing my income, and then I also every year I would have a bigger tax bill. So then I would have to give myself a bigger distribution the following year in order to pay off last year's tax bill, which meant next year I had even more money that I'm declaring. And so it was not efficient whatsoever. So don't do this, please. I beg of you. Your financial goals are, let's get you to that 1 month cash on hand. So that's goal number one. You're not distributing any profits to yourself at this point. You just got to get to that level. That's sort of like permission to play. After which you can start to participate in quarterly distributions, but I wouldn't take all the money. I would have maybe half of that money coming to me as a distribution if I needed the cash. And the other half I would put towards the next goal, right? Which is to get to 2 months cash on hand. Okay. Rinse and repeat until you get 3 months cash on hand. Okay. Once you have 3 months cash on hand in the business account, you don't need to keep accumulating cash in that business account. Now you've got like a pretty significant buffer for your business. So as I said before, if your business is burning through 20 grand a month, once you get 60K in there as a buffer, you don't need to continue to grow that. In fact, you're doing yourself a disservice by letting that money atrophy inside those accounts if you don't do that. So the fifth goal, once you've reached 3 months, is now we're going to get to the space where you're going to invest. That's that maximize portion of that wheel. Now we're in a space where we're investing in positive cash flowing assets. We're investing in the next cycle of growth, and we're participating in some distribution. So you want to be really disciplined with how much money you take out, because if you take it out and you spend it on trips and all that fun stuff, you have to now forego. The trade-off is you can't finance the next level of growth, and you can't buy a real estate investment. So you want to be really disciplined here and make sure that you are taking some reward for the growth, but you're also realizing the real promise of this financial system, in that you're able to fund your own growth and you're able to reinvest your profits into things that are going to be taking care of you 20 years from now. Okay, let's get into your monthly actions here. Number one, mid-month, what you want to do is check where you are in relation to your goals every month and make whatever adjustments you need to do. So you check your revenue, go, okay, where am I in relation to the goal that I had for this month? And then if you need to make any kind of tweaks in terms of your activities or in terms of how you're spending or whatever your tactical plan is, you want to be watching revenue at least monthly. And I like mid-month for that. End of month is where we're going to now take inventory of what happened. This is the reviewing of the P&L, right? And then you're going to set your next goal. You're now either going to be in an optimize. So if the P&L is not looking too good, then we're going to make some changes to it. You need to be making changes on a monthly basis. So you're going to optimize, or we're going to, if it's optimal, then we're going to scale. We're going to increase our revenues, and we're going to that next level. And then also you want to transfer out on a monthly basis, whatever your verified profits are, and as well as your tax, transfer that out into the accounts, get them out of sight, out of mind, push them into the accounts that are not your main accounts as well. Like get those right out of your line of sight so you can't dip back in. This forces your business to live on what's left. If the 70% that's left in your operations account isn't enough to run your business, that's a sign that you need to remargin your business and lower your expenses, or you better have a really clear path to increasing your revenue quickly because you have what we call an unsustainable model. On a quarterly basis, you're going to give yourself a raise, hopefully, if applicable. If your revenue is trending in the right direction, you want to pay yourself a salary. Your CEO salary should be a percentage of revenue. And so, we've historically, I've used 5% of revenue as a fair CEO salary. And even if it's just a business of one, have a salary that you pay yourself, have a commission pool that you pay yourself to 50%, and then also make distributions to yourself with the profits that you generate. This is a really good habit and a really good platform to have, because as you do add more people, you can just continue to do the exact same thing, right? You're still paying yourself a salary, although it gets bigger. You're still going to pay yourself commissions if you plan to stay in the business and do deals, and your distributions are going to get larger along the way. But you have a 3-course meal with owning a business. Quarterly is when you participate in your distributions. Okay. So if you've met your cash reserves and we're not in a heavy growth cycle, you're going to pay yourself a nice distribution, right? This is where you get to celebrate, or you're going to take that distribution and you're going to go and invest it. But you want to be distributing yourself on a quarterly basis, not a monthly basis. And you want to make your tax installments quarterly as well. So get rid of the money, pay the taxes. Hopefully you have a tax return at the end of the year instead of a big bill to pay. Also, just a little pro tip, you want to have a really good credit card that's earning points or miles. I believe that the Amex Gold is the best card if you're in the States. If you're in Canada, if you can still use an Amex card is great, but I also really like the Infinite Business Visas with TD are amazing, best ones that I've had. So you really want to make sure you're running all of your business expenses through a credit card. You're going to accumulate huge amounts of miles. And if you're anything like me and you like to travel, like I haven't paid for a flight in years because I'm just accumulating all these points. I know most people on this call are doing that, but I just wanted to add that if you're not using a credit card for your business expenses, and I mean all of them, you're leaving some of the fruits of your labor on the table. Okay. Next concept is what we call productivity per person, the PPP. Okay, this is a really cool metric to track, and it's something that I learned by reading the book Building an Elite Organization by Don Wenner. And he's got his entire company rallied around this one metric and getting better over time. And when he told me in the book, so I calculated mine, and at the time we were about $200,000 in revenue per person on the team. And that includes all of our administrators, et cetera. In the book, he shared that he was at 100,000 when he first started measuring it. And he's now in his organization, and they do about $1 billion in revenue. He's now at over $1 million revenue per person on the team. So he's 10x his productivity per person. And you can imagine what that does to the profit margin. That also allows you to pay those people more, right? So it's not just more profits. It also means that the fewer people who are responsible for the larger amount of revenue can be paid more, which means you can attract better talent. You can attract A players to your team. So this metric just works in any way you slice it. It's better for the ownership group. It's better for the people who are there working because they get to participate in profit sharing or in revenue sharing. And because there's more productivity per person, there's just more pie to split between less people. It's a great metric to follow. So I'll give you some examples of how this works. Let's just say right now that you're bringing in $250,000 a year and it's just you and your assistant. Okay. Your current productivity per person is 125. You got $250,000 revenue, 2 people sharing it. It's 125. Doesn't mean you're each getting 125 grand. It just means 250 divided by 2 is 125. Okay. Next, another example might be a $600,000 producer, might be you, might be your admin. You might have an intern, which is a licensed intern, which might be premature at 600,000. You don't need this big of a team. But you could have 4 people generating $600,000 and your productivity per person has gone up. You're still going to be more profitable on a percentage basis than you were in the previous step. And you've got more people. Many hands make light work. At this stage, you might already be funding that sort of 7-figure business. With 4 people, you can easily get to 7 figures. But let's just say once you clear that hurdle and you're now at 1.2, it might be 7 of you. It might be you, your operations coordinator, your executive assistant, your intern, another associate agent that you're feeding, another associate agent feeding, and an ISA feeding the 3 of you guys. Well, you got 7 people sharing 1.2, you're at 171,000 in productivity per person. So that metric has improved at every milestone. And so too has your profitability, and you can continue to scale that way. So calculating that, knowing where you are and knowing that every year you have a goal to get a little bit better on that one metric is going to allow you to maintain profitability. The opposite of that, and I've done this, I've made this mistake, is that in an effort to add a bunch of leverage to our agents, because we were really focused on retention, we added a number of bodies and we didn't get a corresponding bump in our revenue. And so our productivity per person went from 200,000 down to like 120. What do you think happened to our profit margins? Right. So we were not watching that. I didn't read this book. I didn't read this book until maybe 2 years ago. So I've only been watching it for 2 years. I've got this and any other company that I'm working with. This is a metric that we're really watching closely. All right. Let's talk about the profitability killers. And these are all the bad mistakes I've made along the way. Number one, if you have the wrong comp structure, meaning the splits, how you're paying, even if you're just a solopreneur, if you don't have a 50-50 split with yourself, you're not going to be sustainable. If the model that you exist in, like you're at a place where the splits are too high and then you're trying to run this business, like the brokerage that you hang your hat at, if they're taking too much and you're trying to do this, that might not work either. You've got to have a good model that works from the beginning. So low cost if you're out of brokerage, or if you're your own brokerage, then of course you got to make sure that you've got your own business model that's sustainable. So I can work with you on that. There's 100 different ways to skin the cat, but I really think we've built a model that serves all the stakeholders. We've built a model that the agents are making 5-6 times what the industry average is. The clients are over the moon with the level of service that they're getting, because many hands make light work, and we can standardize it, make it consistent. And with those two things figured out, you add in the third piece, which is it good for the shareholders? Is it a good business to own? And the answer to that, I can tell you unequivocally, is yes, it is. And so if you can solve those other two and you can earn a nice living, that's a model you can scale. So number one, you got to have that. Otherwise, you'll never reach profitability. You got to make sure your business model can sustain. The second profitability killer is trying to compete on price. I've talked about this at length, but your goal must be to be the premium option in your marketplace. Not being premium, you're leaving a ton of meat on the bone. If you're premium, you now have the cash. If you can provide the value, that is a no-brainer. It's not a price competition, it's a value competition, but suggest you can. You got the right model and you can provide the value. By being premium, being the most expensive in your market versus the price leader, you now have cash to reinvest back into more people to make the service better. You have cash to put into client appreciation. You have cash to put into support, and you can scale. If you're not premium, you can't do those things. So your product will be worse, and your ability to accumulate cash reserves will be worse, and your ability to hire people and hire additional help to support the business will be stifled. So you need to be the premium option in order to do this at profitability. Number three, not running profit first, waiting for that day when there's magically a whole bunch of money left over after you've just had one big general account and been running all your expenses through it. That is going to be, you're chasing something that doesn't exist. You have to install a profit first discipline in your business right away. Otherwise, it's a huge profitability killer. And you got to put the financial controls in. So those monthly and quarterly things that I just suggested, those are what we call financial controls. You've got to have that. If you're flying blind and you're just going based on gut, which is what I've done. And the curse for me is I'm really good with numbers and I'm really good at kind of knowing roughly where I am. And so I ran on gut for so long. The problem with that is profit margins, 2 and 3%, that slippage that you can never get that precise in your head, that can double your margin, right? Those little mistakes that you make on the top line of revenue, they just can have a big impact to the bottom line. So you need financial controls to make sure this goes well. Not having that will really cut your profitability in half. Cost creep. I'm the worst for this. I set these targets and then shiny objects come at me and I keep adding more things. And I just allow my expenses to grow, which is why I have to have the control on a quarterly basis. I go through my credit card statement and I just cut the fat that I allowed to kick in. And so that's super important. Don't allow cost creep to erode all your profitability. It did that to me for years. Employee turnover, super, super costly. The cost of getting people up to speed, it stifles how much growth you can have. It's also very expensive to train, to hire a new person. So keeping your employees happy, finding a model where they've got lots of runway, there's a career path for them to improve. One of the things we've done really well is we've have a pretty good track record of having people start on the front desk making 35, 40 grand a year. And 4 or 5 years later, they're making 80 to 120K in supportive roles, still on our team. They're still in admin. They've just managed to become more valuable over time. And we've built this career path. So we know we're going to have low turnover because they see lots of future with us. It's really important that you do that for both your agents and your admin, that there's a lot of runway for them. Otherwise, you're going to have that turnover, and turnover is so costly when it comes to profitability. You got to have a growth plan. I shared with you ours, that quarterly seasonality to it. You've got to have a plan for that. You've got to have the ratios right. If you don't have the golden ratio and the right growth plan, you're going to leave a lot of money on the table. You're just not going to reach that level of profitability. Lesson learned, learning this one again right now. You got to cut the fat as soon as the hard times hit. You can't allow a couple of months to go by. Things are going to change. You got to remargin the business really fast. So hopefully you've all done that to your business now. You don't want to cut marketing. You don't want to cut the thing that your engine room of your business, but you have to cut any of the fat on your business whatsoever. It's got to go. So you got to do that quickly. Not cutting it quickly is going to be a profitability killer. Flip side of that is, and I'm so guilty for this, just getting loose during the good times. I get so loose with my wallet when the good times are rolling, and I find my margins always get cut from that. Like I see my margins go down when times are good because I just let my expenses creep, and I get loose. It's like, hey man, my times are good. It's all good. And you lose that discipline. You got to stay disciplined year round. And lastly, you have to have a very robust tracking and reporting system. You really got to be using it, whether that's tools within your CRM or you're using Google Sheets, and you've got a good bookkeeper and you're taking the time to track and analyze and go through that whole 5-step process that I shared. You really got to have good reporting and good tracking. Otherwise, as I said before, you're flying blind. You're like a pilot without an instrument panel and without gauges and maps to look at. Like, it's just not going to work. You got to have it. And then with growth over time, the thing to realize is every time your business grows by 35 to 50%, your existing infrastructure is going to break, right? There are these little inflection points that your business will hit. You have to expect that in real time. These are good problems to have. And it's good for you to know and have somebody that's been where you want to go, having a coach or having a mentor at your office or somewhere who's been where you want to go, that can kind of tell you, okay, here's where it's going to break next, and here's what you're going to need. And then you take your business right up to that breaking point. You get a little bit ahead of it where you start hiring or you start adding that next piece in advance of the break. And then you don't spend too much time in the break and having to go back into rebuilding. You're not reinventing the wheel each time. You're just adding the right person at the right time. But you really want to get that tension. You really want it to be like, it's almost going to burst at the seams. People are on the verge of saying like, this is too much, we can't keep up. And then you add that next person in. So that's how you get that nice little pop of profitability at the end. Okay. So that's how growth looks. It's not as linear and straight as we'd like it to be. So again, the goal here is scaling production, not workload. Okay. Want to let you guys know about something that we're doing right now. I am going to do a case study group for folks that are interested in becoming really good at conversion. One thing that I've learned in coaching for the last year, we've gotten some really, really good results with people when it comes to setting up the business infrastructure and all these tools. But the conversion side of things has been a little bit elusive still. And we have all these tools. It's just that I get on these calls and I talk all about kind of macro stuff. What people need right now, from what I'm finding, is they need real granular conversion boot camp, if you will. So I'm going to do that in the new year. And I'm looking for a small group, maybe 10, 12 people that want to join me on this. And what we're going to do is we're going to get really granular with the scripting. I'm going to pay for a script coach from InsideSales.com or Smart Inside Sales to come, and he's going to do group coaching on scripting. There's going to be accountability. There's going to be role playing. I'm going to still do a weekly group call as well, where we're going to talk about all the secrets to conversion. There's going to be 30 minutes of me teaching a webinar similar to this on the next piece in the conversion funnel. And then we're going to do Q&A and answer your questions in real time. It's going to be really, really good for getting, that conversion piece, which is really, that's the engine room of your business. You've got to be able to take the leads that you're buying and generating online and convert them into dollars. We want to get you to the point where you're putting, for every dollar you put in, you're getting 10 to 12 bucks out. And the only way to do that is to get really tight on conversion. And so as fun as all this scaling stuff is to talk about, as fun as all the systems and the protocols and things that I love to help build out, really, until you've got conversion mastered, you can't really scale. So we've got to get this point. This is like really crucial. So if you're interested in joining me for the small group, all I would suggest to you is just hit me up with a DM, or you can send me an email, however you want, but a DM on Instagram at VW Academy. I know there's a couple people on this call already who are going to join me as well. So I think I've got about 8 spots left, and we're going to do a group coaching in the early new year and get you guys dialed in.
So AJ, David is asking when it's going to start. Early new year. Do you have dates yet, or are we still waiting?
I want to fill the spots here first. I think I imagine a couple people from this group will reach out, and then I'm gonna send it out to everybody. I haven't yet. You guys are the first people I've told about this. The next thing I'm going to do is inside of this community. There's 742 people in there. I'm going to do a live stream here pretty soon about this boot camp. I imagine that I'll fill the order pretty quick, but I wanted to give you guys kind of priority because you guys have been awesome, and the REW Academy has been very good to me. So I want to make sure that you guys are the first people that get have access to this. I'm only taking 12, and I'm going to do this one-on-one live transparently. The recordings from this and the case studies and the success stories from this are going to be what are going to help me sell this as a course, but I am not going to be involved. It'll be the videos, and it'll be people going through video modules, etc. So I really want to just work with people one-on-one, blow up your business. And then, yeah, as I say, candidly, this is going to be a course down the road that I'm going to charge big money for.
Aaron Reeves says to the hosts and panelists, she's in. You can sign Carly up for sure. Looks like David's probably pretty interested, so that's awesome. I do have a question from earlier. I want to ping. This is from Jackie Kinley. She's asking about in the growth phase, when you consider your marketing, what percentage do you typically invest in TOMA? And so for anyone who doesn't know what that is, that's the top of mind sort of advertising, things like print, direct mailers, farms, etc., versus your online paid lead gen, etc.
Yeah, great question. So for me, I've always been kind of 80-20, 80 on the direct response lead generation, 20% on top of mind branding. Now, there's a kind of a critical mass that you need to reach before you really start investing heavily. So if you've only got a couple grand a month to spend, I would not be involved at all in that legacy media stuff. Like really just hyper target your $2,000 a month on pay-per-click and scale from there. For me, I got into radio, television, billboards, mailers, all that stuff once I was at critical mass, about $2 million in revenue. And then I started taking, 50, 60 grand a year and putting into that. And then what I actually did was I used a vendor program to finance it. And so I was actually charging my mortgage brokers, title reps, et cetera. And with that cash, I was then using that money to go buy legacy media. And it was good because what it does is it makes your ads more clickable. It's just like if you're number one on Google My Business and you're organically on page 1, people see you there. It's like a proof of that you're solid, and it's social proof that you're on page 1, and then they're more likely to click your pay-per-click ad. Similarly, if they hear your name on the radio, or if they're getting mailers from you or whatever, there's going to be your ads become more clickable. But you don't need that in order to be profitable in pay-per-click, and you can waste a lot of money. Like to get on the radio, you're gonna spend a couple grand a month. And for me, if I'm just tracking in my CRM where our business came from, I'm a break even on the legacy media stuff. I know it's a little better than that, and I know it's reducing my cost per lead over on the direct response side, but for sure, I've scaled my business with pay-per-click leads.
Yeah, and SEO is similar too. It's about 20%. So if you're at scale and you're spending like 10 grand, it's like 6 grand PPC, 2 grand SEO, 2 grand TOMA. But if you're sub 1,000, if you want actual numbers, that $1,000 or less should all go to PPC because it's direct and controllable, right?
What do we got for other questions?
Let's see here. Just a reminder, this session will be recorded and will be replayed and available at the REW Academy. Do you guys have any other questions on advertising spend, paper or per people productivity, profitability, all of the things? Anyone else have any questions? Actually, I have one while we're waiting. So this is my dichotomy because we're a people business, right? And, you know, obviously real estate is similar. You talk about cutting the fat quickly, but then you also talk about not losing your great people, retaining your great people, right? And I think the nature of people who have employees that have an associated costs that aren't 100% utilized during a downturn, right? The instinct is to go, I have too much salary. But then the longer term, sort of more experienced view is, what does it cost me to replace that person later? And what do I lose by not having them, right? So how do you juggle that whole, they're not even close to 100% utilized right now, but they have so much intellectual property, so much value to my business, even if they're 50 or 60% utilized, I can't possibly lose them. How do you juggle that decision on that salary, or how do you add more profitability to that person so that you can keep them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a question that we faced for sure. It's an awesome question. When I talk about fat, the first thing I'm talking about are like just stuff that you're paying for, that like the nice to haves that you don't need, right? Like it's like getting tax based, right? So you're cutting all the fat. The other thing, like when it comes to personnel, you know, like in a hot market where, you know, even a turkey can fly in a windstorm, you start picking up people who didn't necessarily work out, but they're kind of nice to have because they still created, you know, they created some efficiencies and they, you know, they definitely added some value, but they're not like your A players. Okay. When you know you're going through a change in revenue that's going to be abrupt, you got to figure out who your A players are, who your your true talent are. And in a perfect world, if you can find a way to say, okay, we're going to get by on less, and we're actually going to be able to pay these A people more to be able to do more. But some of the fat might be some of the people that, you know they're not going to be long term. You know they're not adding a ton of value, or you can just live without it. You might have to make some hard decisions in that regard. But yeah, I agree. I would sooner that the last thing that I would cut ever is talent. And if they've got, as you say, intellectual property that adds a lot of value, I think your goal is to try to get as much out of them as you can. Go to them and say, what, you know, like, be transparent. Our productivity per person has dropped. Our profitability has fallen off. I'm doing everything that I can right now to avoid making tough decisions that are going to hurt our future growth. What ideas do you have? Like, how can we get more out of you? How can we increase, you know, your output right now? Cause you've got some extra time on your hands. How can we repurpose you a little bit? Right. And we've got, you know, for example, we've got our marketing department repurposing now, creating more content. We've got a whole bunch of things that, because with the extra time on your hands, like, okay, we've got some of our interns that are willing to go do like guerrilla tactics stuff on expireds and for sale by owners that we weren't doing before. So we're trying to get the most out of people and using that extra time to grow that productivity per person. We got another good question here.
Yeah. What are some of the strategies for gaining that market share as the market downshifts? Is one of the questions from James.
I mean, the simplest answer is outspend everybody, right? I mean, it communicates such a level of strength. And I'm talking about marketing that's measured and that, you know, you're set up well enough to convert that, you know, you can get a return on it. But doubling down on market share and being that sort of message to the market. One thing we do really well is we do these market reports via video, and then I put a ton of money behind them to promote them so that tens of thousands of people are going to see these reports. And I communicate where we're at. I don't sugarcoat it. I tell people the truth. Here's where it is. It might get a little bit worse. Here's who this market works for. Here's who it doesn't. If you're this, call me. I know the answer. If you're this, hang tight. Wait 6 months. It might be better, right? Like, I just tell people what time it is. And I put a lot of money behind those. And then people naturally gravitate towards people who show strength, who are willing to spend in a tough market, who are like, hey, I'm here. I've got solutions. That's a great way to find market share. You build a reputation for being kind of that lighthouse in the storm, right? You're that beacon of strength and hope. And you've got, people are looking for leadership right now. So I would double down on how you communicate that leadership to the marketplace. And then I would also double down on any of the marketing that is working, anything that you're getting ROI with, just add more gas to the fire. I would forego some profitability now just to steal market share for sure.
And I would say it's short and short mid only, and you have to be able to measure it. So like, don't do a long-term project that you hope if you take a lot of your profit and it pays out in 3 years, that's not going to do the thing you want right now. So if it's pay-per-click, if it's video, if it's social media, if it's measurable, do it, right? But don't don't go doing maybe in 3 years I'll get a bunch of backlinks that might help my rankings if I spend $50,000 today. Like that, the long-term stuff has to be backburnered for sure.
Yeah, like an example with the video, and I'm trying to get my coaching clients to do this stuff as well. So you push out the video, and at the end of it, you have a call to action, and you say, if you're interested to know what your house would sell for in today's market, you can start that process right here. And you have a little button to your home valuation thing. And, I know REW offers a landing page that you can have, that you can link directly to that. You can say also, if you're interested to see what kind of deals there are on the open market, you can start that process right here, click here. And then you've got it set up so that you actually get a report on who clicked the link, right? You send it out through your CRM, and then you get a report on who clicked that link. Then you actually call those people and ask them what questions they've got about the market. It's not enough to just throw it out there and just let the Brinks truck back up to your house. You've got to play some offense here. You got to have a strategy on how you're going to monetize it. Just like pay-per-click, you got a strategy. I'm going to put $1,000 in. I'm going to grab one client from that. I'm going to do that by making 100 calls, right? Like you know the system. Similarly, if you're going to make video, you've got a plan around that. You do your long form video, you see who comes, and you splice and dice that video up into little social media posts. Like you got to have a plan for it.
Yeah. Last question I think we have time for here says, I'm really focusing on existing clients. Are you doing anything to educate existing clients on wealth management and real estate investing?
Yeah, I actually just did an event called Investing in a Changing Market. And if anybody's interested, I actually recorded it. I haven't got the recording back. I just did it last week. Went really well. I sold tickets to it. This was a cool idea. I sold the tickets for $50 a pop. I sold 85 tickets. Okay. And it cost me about $2,000 to throw the event. To get the event space was $500, and I brought in a videographer for $1,500. And so those were my costs on it. And I had about $500 in Facebook ads. I said net proceeds go to Christmas hampers. You can always find a good charity. So I raised $1,500 or something for Christmas hampers, paid for the event, and I had 85 people in a room there to watch me for a 90-minute presentation on investing in a changing market. We got a ton of business from that. At the end of the night, I put a QR code right on the presentation, and it went right into my Calendly. And I said, guys, I know I threw a lot at you. If you want to take the next step, take a picture of that up on the screen. That goes right into my calendar, and I'm happy to help you, right? And so it was a mix of my past clients and friends that they bought or brought with them, saying, hey, you got to come watch this guy. He knows what he's talking about. So yeah, that's how I would do it right now, as well as doing very specific videos tailored towards real estate investors to your past clients.
That is awesome. AJ, we are at time. Thank you everyone who took the time to show up on December pre-Christmas for this webinar. We will share it out along with portion one for anyone who didn't get the first part of this webinar. And of course, as Eliana mentioned, they are all available through REW Academy. So my brother, I hope you have a great Christmas with the family, and we'll see you soon. Thank you everybody for coming.
Thanks guys. And thank you, Morgan. Merry Christmas. Bye, Eliana.
Bye.